joining to discuss is Nick Hulscher, a respected epidemiologist and researcher with the McCullough Foundation, known for his groundbreaking work on vaccine side effects and autism links. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
How did you feel about the announcement? Were you expecting a more bold stance, more discussion of vaccines, or did you think it was pretty well balanced?
Honestly, I was shocked based on all of the previous reporting of this event. It appeared there would have been no mention of vaccines at all, but we did get a lot of mention, over 5 minutes of simply talking about how vaccines may be contributing. So that part was huge. What we did not see was direct policy or direct action regarding vaccines, just talk. But we did see direct action regarding Tylenol. Now, there's a few key things that we have identified with Tylenol and vaccines. So it appears that the primary trigger to the regression of autism is actually vaccines, where Tylenol actually serves as an amplifier. As you can see there in that figure, it begins with this hyper-vaccination exposure. Children get about up to 32 doses, at a very young age. And then usually they regress, they get a high fever or a febrile seizure, and then they have developmentally regressed after that. And Tylenol is recommended to be given when the child develops a high fever, and Tylenol itself is toxic to the liver, depletes glutathione, the body's defense system. So all of these toxins from the vaccines just invade the brain, and that's why we see this neurological damage and developmental regression.
I mean, I'm of the same opinion that I think that it's multiple factors. I was quick to discount the Tylenol argument altogether in the beginning because I was like, oh, here we go. They're just going to throw something else in there so that they don't have to say the V word, the vaccines, as any possible contributing factor. But I've come around on that, and I think that it makes sense that it could amplify or exacerbate inflammation to some degree, or the body's response. So Tylenol may play a factor, but a lot of us on this side of the aisle are thinking in that same way. Why do you think that they couldn't go all in and lay that out like you just did, that this Tylenol could be contributing to the vaccines as a factor of causing autism?
Right, that's a good question. And I really don't know the true answer to that, but it appears they want to take this approach slowly and slowly kind of introduce vaccines into the equation as the vaccine interests, the big pharmaceutical interests are so far entrenched. And so instead of going directly and making action, they're doing it at a slow pace. That's what I think is the case here. Now there is a study by Prada and colleagues that came out in August of this year that identified there's about 6 studies that found an association between prenatal Tylenol use and autism. But we have to remember one thing: in all of these studies that link Tylenol to autism, none of them account for vaccination. They don't even mention the word. And so that's what's called confounding by indication, because the main points when these children are taking Tylenol, when these mothers are taking Tylenol, is after vaccination when they suffer fever, which is on all the package inserts. So that's a big thing for sure. And hopefully they can start to incorporate this messaging.
Like you, I was pleased that vaccines were mentioned at all, particularly when Trump was talking about, he told a story about a woman he had worked with, and that the blonde-haired child was running around, and then suddenly he wasn't, and this woman was crying and upset, and he said it was right after she had gotten the vaccines and he was no longer with them. And so he told that story. Obviously that made an impression on him. And then he also said in the course of this long presser, frequently mentioned a lot of times if you're going to get the vaccines, why do it all at once? Space them out, go back 4, maybe 5 times. You know how Trump does, he just repeats and repeats and repeats. But he kept on saying that, so he was at least acknowledging that, whoa, we've gone. But I almost wanted to like reach through the screen when he was talking about how many more jabs that we give now compared to the past. And he had mentioned the incidence of autism rising, and he mentions California, and he basically kind of like throws it away like it's even worse in California, and just kind of like lets that point skip by. To me, it's like, okay, we're talking about, we give all these extra shots, and now we're having all these extra incidents of autism, and it's higher in California. Well, what do they do in California? They don't give you really any exemptions for vaccines. So the incident of the shots and the jabs is arguably highest in California.
Right, right, and that's exactly right. They have some of the highest childhood vaccine uptake in the entire country. You're right, no exemptions. These kids are forced to get it just to go to school, and the graphic on the screen there has to do with a lawsuit. The CDC is actually being sued for operating an illegal and unconstitutional 72 dose hyper-vaccination schedule. All 72 of these doses from birth to age 18, not one has been tested in combination. And particularly the cumulative safety of 72 doses was never studied. So it's literally just experimental at this point. Nobody knows what's going to happen with all of these doses. And that's exactly why they're being sued, to kind of dismantle this dangerous program. And so this is huge. This whole vaccine ideology is now crumbling down as people begin to understand the real risks and just how absurd it is. And even Trump highlighted that. He said it's a travesty we're injecting beautiful babies with all these toxic loads of needles. It's stupid, and it's got to stop.
Where are we at with this lawsuit, and how are you feeling about that? Because we frequently talk about the pharmaceutical companies having this exemption from liability. They talk, and doctors tell us, oh, they're so safe, but if anything happens, you have no rights to sue. Now this is a lawsuit, it's my understanding, against the CDC. Are there protections there? Is this just like a David and Goliath situation because this is a huge government agency? What's the status there?
Yeah, this is a David and Goliath situation, so we'll have to wait and see the status. I mean, the lawsuit was recently filed about a month ago, so we don't have any new updates on this. But since the CDC is now being completely restructured, they're firing all of those leaders who are compromised by pharmaceutical interests. Once that restructuring is complete, this lawsuit may have a much easier chance of being successful in what they're trying to do, which is to allow exemptions in all states to these childhood vaccines based on personal decision, not just religious. And so that will save many parents around the country from having to go line up their kid for 72 doses just to go to school. So this is huge. We hope this gets through, and we hope more exposure is given to this lawsuit. And yeah, hopefully the CDC restructuring is completed in a short period of time as Americans continue to suffer.
Now, as an epidemiologist, that word's always been hard for me. I have to really think about it before I say it. But as someone with that skill, what are your thoughts on vaccines in general? Do you think the concept is good, but we've just been making them so terribly? Are there particular ingredients that we need to address, and then we can have a safe vaccine schedule? Where do you stand on that?
Well, the problem is, so when you inject something, right, intramuscularly, you're not going to really, in any case, get a high level of protection from an infectious respiratory agent. So just that's already flawed. But the problem is with all of these vaccines, literally all of the childhood ones, none of them were tested with long-term placebo-controlled trials. And so we literally don't know the long-term safety profile of any of these, right? And then we do also know they are loaded with aluminum, like you see in that figure there. That was a CDC study, found increased risks of asthma with aluminum containing vaccines. We see links between aluminum in these vaccines and sudden infant death syndrome, as well as autism. They find high levels of aluminum in autism brains when they looked in their brains. And so basically, this is toxin. Thimerosal is a toxin. The mercury that was already removed though 20 years ago. But yesterday, they actually announced they are removing aluminum from the childhood vaccines, and that's absolutely huge. But then the last thing we have to consider is it's not just mercury, it's not just aluminum, it's everything else in these vaccines. It's all these cell lines, it's all the killed pathogens. All of this contributes to the total toxic load, and particularly when you administer these in combination, so 3, 4 doses at once, that gives the highest risk of neuroinflammation, leading to this developmental regression.
And that's really just it for lay people who don't understand how this works. It's not particularly, like you said, any one toxin that is to blame, but the overload on a fresh new baby, and in the time of their life when they're doing their most growth and their most development. And so, like so many things that we're learning, it's really the inflammation. I feel like we're learning that about so many of the ailments that we have is inflammation, and figuring out what's causing the inflammation, right?
Right, exactly. And it appears that autism is a form of brain damage, of neurological damage. The brain becomes inflamed when they're in the development process. Neurons become damaged and destroyed, and unfortunately, they end up with the ability to not function as they used to. They literally regress. They can't make eye contact anymore. We have to remember, of all these autism cases now, 1 in 31, 1 in 12 boys in California, about 26% of those are profound autism. So they
Mm,
can't even use the bathroom themselves.
so
And that's
sad.
that's a very, very bad thing. And we're actually working on one of the largest, most comprehensive analyses on what is causing autism. We've identified many risk factors, but vaccines are the central risk factor for sure. There's over 100 studies we've identified that have found a positive association between vaccines and autism, and only about 20 something that found no association. So it's very glaring. And all these other risk factors, right? Gut brain axis, a maternal immune activation, genetics, right? This all plays a role, but vaccines appear to be the main trigger.
I want to get to that in a moment, but you talked about how autism is being identified as a type of brain damage. I'm not sure if you have anything to add to this or not, but I know of people with autism, particularly even family members that have autism, and they have that characteristic of actually being a savant when it comes to numbers and memory. Is there any explanation for how that can happen?
Right. Well, that brings up the major problem of autism classification, right? There's a giant spectrum, and we kind of just throw everybody onto there, right? Like, like a guy who loves computers, who's great with numbers, is not the same as a profoundly autistic person that needs toilet assistance and daily 24/7 care, right? So there's a large difference. So that's the next step actually that needs to happen. We have to start specifically looking at profound autism. That's the most concerning. These other cases, we don't know if it's autism or not, if they're just being classified as autistic because of this large spectrum. It creates so many questions, and yeah, that's a hard question to answer. If these kind of neuroatypical individuals, very smart individuals, we don't know if that's from vaccination or not.
Interesting. Okay. Now you quickly mentioned something about genes, and that's what I'm seeing a lot of on my social media right now is people very angry saying that this is genetic, it's passed down, it has nothing to do with all of these other things. Now I have been seeing a lot of talk about a MTHFR gene, and every time I'm seeing this scroll across my page, I'm thinking I'm seeing a dirty word. like I'm like, it's such a weird acronym that it looks like it's a bad word. But uh, I saw a clip of Dr. McCullough, who you work with or have corresponded with, him talking to Jenny McCarthy, who really was one of the first to bring major exposure to this. They're talking about this gene in particular. This is a short clip, and then we can talk about it on the other side.
Like, for instance, I've discovered the MTHFR gene mutation since then. I think there still needs to be a lot of work on it, but if it makes sense, if I have trouble detoxing, why wouldn't my child who also has that MTHFR gene mutation? Are those things that should be considered before vaccinating? I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but it's
Well,
something to consider.
you're making the point that there are what's called common genetic variants, and good Irish people like us have the MTHFR. I mean, it's just kind of how we're born. So we're far more needy of B6, B12, methylated folate. So we just have a greater need. It is of note in autistic children, if the background rate of MTHFR is like 25%, which is about what the Irish genealogy is in the United States, it's well more than 75% of kids with autism have MTHFR.
Yeah, yeah, I believe it.
And see that it makes sense to me that there is a gene component to it because there are people that follow the vaccine schedule, faithfully use the Tylenol, and they have no issues that we can visibly see. But then there's obviously others. And then just in my anecdotal experience, I personally have never met someone that had not gotten a vaccine yet was autistic. Now there's a couple people that have been like, my child never had a vaccine but has autism. So, I mean, I guess they exist. I just never have personally met them. But yeah, you will see those that get all the vaccines and then they're fine. So it does seem like there's like a gene component of susceptibility for some people, kind of like how we saw with COVID-19 jabs. Some people had all these problems and others didn't. So it would make sense that there's some people that are just more predisposed, logically speaking.
Right, exactly. Yeah, the MTHFR gene, when that is basically dysregulated or not functioning properly, the baby will not be able to process, or not even baby, in all cases, even the adults who still carry this dysfunction will not be able to properly process folate, which is vitamin B9. It's critical for neurodevelopment, right? So if the baby can't process this, it's going to have a very hard time incorporating it into the cells for carrying out crucial functions. So that's exactly why actually we saw at the White House press conference yesterday, they're actually recommending a form of activated folic acid, a form of activated vitamin B9 for autism, and there are documented improvements in certain cases in those with these gene abnormalities. So yeah, that is definitely a plausible reason as well. But yeah, so not every autism case will be from a vaccine, but we believe a majority will be. And yeah, all these other factors, they do still play a part.
Excellent. Well, I know you've done a lot of great work on COVID-19 jab and introducing legislation to have states stop the mRNA. But I'll have to talk to you about that next time because I'm running out of time. But thank you for this information. And please let us know if anything new comes out as we continue to follow and hope and pray that we can make some strides in protecting children moving forward and in helping to treat those that are dealing with autism right now.
Yes, definitely. I'd love to come back on, and we'll have some big news soon once this autism study is out. And thank you so much for having me.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nick.